I'll just briefly recap one important theme I emphasized today and be happy to take whatever questions y'all have got. Obviously, I've talked about many things. One of the most important things I was making today was the importance of restoring the American dream for our children and grandchildren. Of all the dangerous legacies of the Obama administration, I think one of the most dangerous is their policies, their rhetoric aimed at redefining the American dream. So it's all about a more expansive, more intrusive federal government, where they're managing the slow decline of this great country instead of truly believing our best days are ahead of us. I will say this, though. I'm an optimist about our country's future. Our 40th president reminded us every generation has to choose for themselves to renew those principles of freedom. You saw the enthusiasm today here. You feel it across the country. People are saying enough is enough. I still believe our best days are ahead of us. I still believe we are blessed to be in the greatest country in the history of the world. I still believe my kids, I've got 3 young children with my wife, will look back and say, our parents did leave us more opportunities than their parents left them, but it's not inevitably so. It's up to us to choose for ourselves. That's why I'm strongly encouraging people to pay attention this November. We've got some important elections we've got to win, and obviously many of those races taking place here in Iowa, the Senate race in particular, some congressional races, the governor's race, but also all over the country. This is an important time for our country. It's time to get us back on the right path. I'll be happy to take questions.
Governor Jindal, in the midst of your lawsuit against Common Core, where does that leave Louisiana kids, when school starts up in September?
I'll say 2 things. Well, I issued an executive order pulling Louisiana out of Common Core, pulling Common Core out of Louisiana. The proponents of Common Core then went to court to try to overturn my executive order. The executive order is still in place. One of the arguments we have made this week in state court in response to this lawsuit is that Common Core, I believe, actually violates federal law. It is established federal law. The federal government doesn't have any place, shouldn't be dictating curriculum decisions to local schools and school boards and states across the country. I believe this is a way for them to backdoor into doing just that. You look at the race to the top waivers, you race to the top money, the No Child Left Behind waivers. You look at Arnie Duncan threatening states, saying he's going to cut off federal funding if they get out of Common Core. This is the federal government trying to coerce what should be local decisions about curriculum. So the executive order still stands. They're in court trying to stop that from proceeding. Here's another thing I think is very curious. I think this shows why it's so important to get the federal government to get Common Core out of these states, out of these classrooms. So the other side says, well, no, this isn't about curriculum. This is just a test. Well, then why in the world are they so hysterical? The test is not supposed to be given for several months. They're saying, well, teachers won't know what to teach if we're getting rid of Common Core. That's exactly the point. They're admitting, by making this ridiculous claim, they're admitting that Common Core is what's going to drive not just tests, not just standards, but curriculum and what our teachers teach our kids, our little boys and girls as they go back to school. That should never be decided by the federal government. I believe it's best decided locally. I think parents are smart enough to make the best educational choices for their kids. So I think that some of the hysteria on the other side of this, on the pro-Common Core side, shows this really is about content. This really is about curriculum. So as it stands, the executive order stands. I've told the Department of Education they need to do an RFP, an open, transparent bidding process where parents, teachers, others have a right to be involved in that process. I've told them the state of Louisiana should develop our own standards, our own tests. We are for tough standards. We want our kids to learn. We simply don't want the federal government dictating to us what curriculum should be taught in our classrooms. I will say this to parents, not just those that are that work on this politically and on a policy perspective. Pay attention to this. It is important. The decisions we make, what our children learn, are important decisions. As a parent, just look at some of the math. And maybe that's undecided on Common Core. Just look at some of the ways they're trying to teach math. It makes absolutely no sense. So as it stands, the executive order stands. The opponents are in state court. I think we made a very, very strong case. This actually violates, not only have they broken state law in breaking our procurement code, it actually violates federal law in trying to allow the federal government to set curriculum. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. And by the way, not only does it violate federal law, I would argue, and this is, I'm not a lawyer, I would argue it violates the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. I don't think this is respectful of the state's prerogatives and state rights.
Governor Jindal, what are your thoughts in regards to what's happening in Iraq, both with ISIS and the Kurds?
A couple of things. One, look, I do think it's good that the president did order the bombing to help prevent the imminent slaughter, not only of Christians, but other religious minorities in Iraq. ISIS is a terrorist group. One of the things that frustrates me, we've still not heard from this president a coherent strategy when it comes to dealing with ISIS. We haven't heard a coherent foreign policy, but at the very least, it would be nice to hear a coherent foreign policy when it comes to ISIS. I think he owes it to the American people, he owes it to our troops in uniform to define what the strategic vision is, what the strategic plan is. It is unacceptable, I believe it is unacceptable to allow ISIS to occupy territory in Iraq, in Syria, to continue to grow in strength. The president did admit they underestimated this threat, they underestimated the strength of ISIS. This is a dangerous threat. This is a terrorist group that's not going to be satisfied simply with the territory in Iraq and Syria. This certainly is an issue for those innocent civilians caught in the middle of this fighting. This is also an issue for all of us that care about our safety, our values, our freedoms. These are terrorists that disagree with our fundamental values, our beliefs. This is a group that will, if it has the capabilities, bring that fight to us. So I think it was right to order the airstrikes. I wish that he had given us a more coherent overview of his strategy, of his plan to deal with ISIS, and I wish they'd also acted sooner. I wish they had not let the crisis grow to this point. But look, there's a common theme here with this president's approach to foreign policy. This is a president that has made multilateralism a goal and not a tactic. This is a president I don't believe believes in or doesn't act as if he believes in American exceptionalism. This is a president who's been inconsistent towards our allies, our enemies, all over the world. A stronger America leads to a more predictable and safer world. Even our enemies benefit from a stronger, more predictable America. What I worry about, and I think this all started, by the way, I don't think this just started in the last few weeks, the last few months. I think this president made fundamental strategic mistakes when he withdrew the interceptors from Poland, the Czech Republic, back in his first term. I think he made a fundamental mistake in not allowing Georgia to join NATO on an expedited basis. I think he made a fundamental mistake later with his so-called red line in Syria. He promised consequences and then nothing, the consequences he promised didn't happen. I think the world took note. I don't think Putin would be in Crimea. I don't think they'd be threatening Ukraine if we had a stronger leader in the White House. If Ronald Reagan were in the White House, I don't believe that they would be in the Crimea. I think it all goes back to, and what I worry about, I'll say two final things on this whole approach, about his approach, his failed approach to foreign policy. I think this goes back to this president, when you look at his approach over the world, you don't see him providing that consistent support, for example, to Israel and their fight against Hamas, a terrorist group declared by our government. And what is that causing? It's causing our friends and allies to question whether they can count on America to be a consistent presence around the world. The president doesn't seem to understand that a stronger America leads, again, to a more predictable, safer world, and a world where we don't have to deploy troops as frequently. Here's my concern. The existential threat is this. We cannot allow, the biggest foreign policy challenge he is going to face as our commander-in-chief, as our president, is the question over Iran. We cannot allow Iran to become a nuclear power. And what I worry is, what lesson does Iran take away from witnessing how we're treating these other countries, how we're treating these other crises? I made this comment yesterday, I'll say it again, and I mean this. I know it's half joking, but I mean this. You know, I think Israel's safer the longer that John Kerry spends time in Nantucket riding a girl's bicycle, windsurfing, or whatever else he's doing in Nantucket. It actually seems to me the longer he stays away, the safer the folks in Israel are. And that's a sad commentary on where our foreign policy is today and on this administration's priorities.
Any comment about the Senate race in Louisiana?
Yeah, I think that it's time to retire Mary Landry. She has been a consistent vote for Harry Reid. She does a great job talking like a moderate as she gets closer to election. She votes like an extremely liberal and partisan Democrat. She has doubled down on her vote for Obamacare. Despite the fact we now know that it was passed based on broken promises and lies. She said that, the president said that if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. He said he was going to cut our premiums $2,500 on average. And the reality is none of that is happening. Obamacare would not be the law of the land if it weren't for these lies and other lies. It's certainly today, you look at the president ignoring parts of the law, choosing which parts of the law he wants to enforce, which parts of the law he wants to suspend. Mary Landry was a proud supporter, continues to be a proud supporter of that bill. On many other issues, I disagree with her. I think she is wrong. On energy, she says she's for Keystone. We've seen no action, no pressure, no real effective pressure on this administration to finally make a decision. I don't know how many more years of studying we need to do. The Canadians are now taking preliminary steps to instead build the infrastructure to ship that oil to the Chinese instead of to us. It makes absolutely no sense. So I think it's time to retire Mary Landry. I think it's also here in Iowa. I think it's time to it's time to elect Joni to the Senate. I think we've got some great candidates across the country. I'm hoping we can retire Harry Reid as majority leader. I would say this to my Republican colleagues that are running for office. And I've campaigned for some. I campaigned for Congressman Cotton in Arkansas. I was up in North Carolina as well. Here's my concern. I think we're going to do very well in November. I hope we take the majority. I hope we retire Harry Reid. I hope we stop the president from nominating these extremely liberal judges to the bench. We as a party have to be for things. We can't just be against things. If we get the majority, and I think we have a very good chance of doing that in November, let's use it to actually get this country back on a path towards growth. I don't like Obamacare. Let's repeal it, but then let's replace it. Let's have a sensible energy policy. Let's fight for school choice. Let's get the federal government. Let's rein in the EPA. Let's get the economy growing again. Let's balance the budget. Here's a crazy thought. Let's actually reduce the out-of-control spending in D.C., but we actually have to do something with the majority. If we don't, I think the voters are already frustrated with both political parties. If we get the majority and don't do anything with it, I think you'll see even more frustration grow, not just with Democrats, but with Republicans as well.
Governor, you're talking about a lot of federal issues and foreign policy. Are you thinking about running for president in 2016?
Well, look, I'll be very honest. I've said it's something I'm thinking about. I'm praying about it. I won't make that decision until after November. We've got many important elections to win before then in this cycle. We've got to win the Senate. We've got to keep the House. I'm vice chairman of the RGA. We've got 36 governor's races, some great candidates running. I think we've got a great chance not only to defend Republican governors like Terry right here in Iowa, but also to pick up some seats held by Democrats like in Arkansas, Illinois, Connecticut, Colorado, and other states as well. In terms of my personal plans, we'll make that decision, my wife and I, as we continue to think and pray about it, we'll make that decision sometime after November. I will say this, and I said this in part to answer the previous question, I think this country is looking for major change. I don't think folks are going to be happy with incremental change. I think this is still a great country, but I think we've got to get back on track if we want to leave the American dream that we inherited from our parents to our kids. And I think that means a big change in direction and policy from what's been going on these last several years in D.C. And so to other Republicans that may be thinking about it, I would hope that as Republicans, as conservatives, we offer detailed, big ideas about how to get the country back on track, repealing Obamacare, rational energy policy, educational policies, defense policies. We need to have the courage of our convictions. We need to play offense and show people that conservative ideas are better, can help their kids join and thrive in the middle class.
We've got a couple other candidates, so, or not candidates, which look at that, huh? We have a couple other people that we need to. But thank you to Governor Jindal for being here.
I want to thank Bob. I want to thank the organization. A fantastic group. I first had the chance to come down here in the aftermath of the floods and some years ago, back in my first year as governor. It's great to be back. Thank you very much for the wonderful job you're doing.
Thank you. God bless you.
And thank you all very much.